So to start off, despite this video going up at the end of the month, I've actually started writing this on the 11th of August while I play the long waiting game that is skill maxing in the vanilla version of the first Samurai Warriors. So to get to the main point of the video, since the beginning of this channel 5 years ago, I have been ranking every game I have 100% completed in order of how much I like them. At the end of every video that features the completion of a game, I've had the ranking scroll with the box arts of the games along with the developer, console and year of release. For the first 3 years it was single file using a repurposed scrolling credits code, but once that got too long I swapped to a GIMP image file I would constantly update to fit more games on screen at once, because I cannot actually code and couldn't figure out how to do it in HTML. However, this choice, which I still believe looks a lot better than the way things were before, came with its own price, that being time. Every game that gets added to the ranking, I must update every number and move each individual game's ranking along the list to make room for it, with every new addition making it that little bit longer. And you may have noticed that I have over 200 entries on that list now. The more I like a game, the less work I have to do. I still have to update every number, but the higher the game is ranked, the lower down the image it gets placed and I have less to move. But when it's ranked something like number 202, that's a lot of time and a lot of boredom and a lot of wrist ache just moving all these images down the list. And I hit the limit of how much I can stand it. And it seems most people who do make it to the end of my videos don't tend to stick around for those parts anyway. Something has to give, and my solutions were to either drop ranking games completely, or change my approach to something more manageable. And I chose the latter for now. When I complete a game, I will show this spreadsheet containing the current ranking and then update it to show the addition of the newest game. I think this will improve things as I'll have to give some sort of explanation as to why I'm placing the new game in its new position, rather than expecting the viewer to sit through a nearly 2-minute scroll to find the new game's placement. I've also separated the ranking into 3 tiers, but I have made said tiers cover a very wide area to avoid people trying to attach the placements to a numerical score, which is something I have no interest in using. So the tiers are the games I did not like, then a middle ground for the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Top Trumps Doctor Who games, for games that adapt an existing non-video game well enough but are no more than that. Then the rest is the games I found okay at worst all the way up to games I find great. I included all this as one big, not fully negative tier because the line between the good and okay is blurry even to me, and to once again reduce the amount of tiers to make it harder for people to find an equivalent numerical score. It'll also let me reinforce that the ranking is purely based on my own tastes and my own emotional attachment to the games. I said that as far back as the very first video, but that video was 5 years ago and I'd rather people not have to watch an embarrassing early video to know this important part. I am in no way trying to make an objective ranking, and if my reason for liking one game over another is very minor or even petty, then that's just how it goes. Here's the best example I can think of. Tetris. You can explain to me why Tetris is a flawless game and I'd have no objections, but personally, I don't dislike the game, but it wouldn't even crack my personal top 100 and no amount of explaining its perfection will change that. I'm not going to lie about how much I like a game based on legacy or whatever. Plus, it'd be really boring. The top 20 or so would be dominated by the same games everyone puts on an objective best games ever list. And then, what's the point of even doing this? So this change will come into effect with the next video I make, which will be episode 52-3 on cyberbots. This makes Metroid Prime Remastered the final video to contain the old ranking style. I didn't want to have a change to the format happen in the middle of an episode, and was planning for the last 2 videos of episode 52 to have the old style. But I can't bear the thought of slogging through 2 more long edits of that image. I've been thinking about this for a while, and in hindsight, dropping it after episode 50 and starting with episode 51 would have been the better choice. That also means saying goodbye to Crimson Fighter from Ease 8, which has been with us for every ranking ever since Warner Bros. Started copyright claiming the Mortal Kombat 3 Soul Chamber theme I was using before. Although I am curious as to how many people watching are actually interested in this ranking aspect of the channel. Part of the reason I've done a lot of obscure games or just games I've never played before is because a chunk, not all, of my favourite games are well known and iconic, and to avoid creating a top ranking that never changes by loading it with my favourites early on, I've had to get creative with some of my choices. So it's helped me out in that way. I can say that none of the games I've covered so far are in my personal top 10. I'm not sure if any would even make it into a top 30, but I've played a lot of games and never put serious thought past a top 10, so I can't say. But now I've covered the important part, I feel like rambling on about other things relating to the channel that I wouldn't get the chance to talk about otherwise. I'm going to be jumping all over the place and there will be some tonal whiplash, so please bear with me. Also, allow me to talk in my usual voice for the rest of this instead of the YouTube voice I put on so people from outside the UK don't struggle with my accent. I just want to see if I can actually keep it up without slipping back into the YouTube voice, I'm curious. If you struggle to understand me, I always have a subtitle track on every video. Let's keep it on the subject of the ranking a little bit more. One thing I have been slightly worried about before is some cases where sequels are ranked in the space one above or below their predecessor, like with Double Dragon and Shock Troopers. That it is boring or comes across as a cop-out or something. But it was my genuine opinion that the gap in quality between those games is very minimal, and I managed to get past it bothering me by remembering a small pet peeve of mine from a few videos I saw over a decade ago when I used to watch those kinds of videos. I don't know if this still happens, but when a person does a video on their personal top whatever games, and then they claim they included a rule that limited a franchise to just one game on the list, that would instantly put me off, because that person is admitting that they're lying, that their favourites include multiple games from a single franchise that they're omitting to make their list more interesting. I clicked because I wanted to see your actual top whatever games, not what you think is a more interesting list. I respect a person who admits their top 10 is loaded with games from the same series, because that's a person who knows what they like and isn't afraid to show it for fear of the dreaded fanboy or fangirl claim. You know, talking normally when reading a script is actually much harder than I was expecting. Something I've never brought up is a rule I set for myself when I first started thinking about this channel. I refuse to describe any game I cover as overrated or underrated. As time goes on, I hate hearing these words more and more. Overrated is always used in a whining, how dare people like this thing more than I do, but I've learned to truly hate the term underrated more. If we're talking whining, the vast majority of this word's usage is just people complaining that their favourite beloved game isn't the most popular in its series. Before I bring up my examples, I just want to make sure people know that I am not saying I dislike these games, or in fact saying anything about their quality, just this aspect of discussion around them. I wouldn't waste my thoughts on games as big as these on a rambling video. Majora's Mask and Final Fantasy IX. Massively beloved games, but still get this endless, underrated cult mantra nearly 25 years later. And I can't see it as anything but self-victimisation over their favourite not being the most popular. My favourite Zelda is only the second most beloved Zelda on the N64. My favourite Final Fantasy is only the third most beloved Final Fantasy on the PS1. And I'm just left thinking, that is a level of adoration entire franchises can only dream of for all of their games combined, let alone for a single game. Another one that's become an issue for me more recently is Unplayable, because it's always so hyperbolic, usually aimed at games that are just older and may have a different control layout than most are used to, or the game feel is a little different than later games in the same series. Like, if I see someone describe something like Mario 64 as unplayable, my first thought is always, you have never played an actually unplayable game in your life. Like, I have said before that Doctor Who Return to Earth is currently the worst game I've ever played in my life, not just for this channel. It plays like total shite, but even that game I would not call unplayable. Atrocious, yes. Unplayable, no. While I'm talking about the rules I set for myself, I may as well go into one of the main ones, that I will not cover a game that is less than a year old, except for that one time I accidentally played Valkyrie 64 without realising it wasn't a year old yet. There are two main reasons for this. First one is that I also don't want to cover a game until all of its DLC and updates is released so I can get it all done in one. Waiting a year lets me wait and see if there will be any additional content at all. If there isn't, I can assume the game is safe to cover. The bigger reason is due to the ranking part of the video. I don't want to risk any possible hype that comes from a new game to influence the ranking. By waiting a year, the hype has died down and my feelings can be more true. Although there is one more reason, and that is that new game discourse is just fucking exhausting. Since starting this channel, I've had less time to play newly released games. I still do, but I've had to be a lot more picky due to having less time. But when I do, I tend to avoid chatter relating to it. I'm not a teenager anymore. I can't be dealing with the war between hype addicts and miserable fuckers who can't enjoy anything and can't let others do so either. The type who I wonder why they even play games at all anymore, because they clearly don't enjoy it anymore. So I'll wait until most of them have moved on before making a video that can risk attracting either crowd. Cutting in from the future. I'm glad I couldn't be asked to upload this for like a week because I wanted to expand on this bit a little more. I'm back to the YouTube voice of these cuttings because it's easier and I want to get them done quick. Another thing this 1 year rule lets me avoid is falling into the trap of trend chasing or desperately trying to keep up with all the current popular games and letting the channel become reliant on them. That sounds like hell and I'd still like to actually enjoy working on this channel. I'm sure cutting off newly released games has been harmful short term, but if I can do well enough just doing whatever games I want when I want without the channel becoming a hostage of the upcoming releases schedule, I'll be much happier than I would be doing really well faster but not having the time to play what I actually want because there's always something new and big around the corner. And back to the original video. Continuing with the topic of which games I'll cover. While I do have a video on my main page with a list of games that will be covered at certain subscriber milestones, and that video does have a list of games I was considering playing while fishing for any interest in them, I do not take direct requests for games to be covered. First is that if I did, I feel many people would jump to either well-known iconic games I'm deliberately putting off because I don't want to burn through them all this early, or a load of insanely massive games that takes hundreds of hours each, and keeping up with all those requests will guarantee burnout and giving up on the channel. The second reason is just my personality. I cannot just be told to watch or play something. Whenever it's something I haven't experienced before, when someone says, "Oh, just watch this," or "play this," my instant decision is always, no. I have to stumble across it myself without the interference of others. Here's an example. I first tried Final Fantasy XII back in 2007, got stuck at one point and put the game aside. I had friends begging me to go back and finish it, but the more I was asked, the more I didn't feel like it. I finally did go back and play through the entire game in 2016, 9 years later. That's the kind of wait you can expect if you keep asking for a certain game. But past that are some more specific cases. Gacha games, where 100% relies on living to the publisher's schedule to avoid missing limited time content and also spending insane amounts of real money, are out. MMORPGs, especially long-running ones that could require literal thousands of hours, nah. I'm also just not an online player in general anyway. Since a game needs all of its content released before I'll cover it, games like Minecraft that are going on forever with endless new updates will continue to keep themselves ineligible. And tied to the discourse thing I mentioned earlier, I have no desire to cover any of From Software's Soulsborne games. I was interested in trying the games years ago, but the culture around them and inability to escape the discourse no matter where you hide yourself away made even hearing the names of those games exhausting to me ages ago. Of course, that's not me saying I won't cover any of the developers' output. I have a full recorded playthrough of Lost Kingdoms done and waiting for the videos to be made. Another cut-in from the future because I remembered another. This one is not an "I will never do this" game, but more of a "if I get far enough with this series I might eventually do it just to cross it off the list, but otherwise I don't feel like doing it," and that's Sonic 2006. It has been done to death. Hell, I'd say covering that game peaked with the 2008 Poké Capman and Crew Let's Play, and everything since has been pointless. Look, it's bad, but the game is 18 years old, move on. But also, I was 14 when that game came out, and even though I didn't play it then, I still got caught up in the whole getting unhealthily angry at a game thing. And I fucking hate my 14-year-old self. Well, myself from about 14 to 16, maybe up to 18, but 14 to 16 especially. Such a pathetic, self-pitying, miserable internet-poisoned whiny shitbag who couldn't let himself enjoy anything, and had to force out some kind of complaints about everything even if I didn't actually believe it. All that has nothing to do with Sonic 2006, but that game and how I chose to react to it remind me of that version of myself the most, and I'd really rather not be reminded. Back to me from about a week ago. One area of gaming that has been neglected on this channel is the PS3 and Xbox 360, the PS4 remaster of Uncharted 1 aside. A lot of that has to do with DLC that's since been delisted. It's good if a game got a complete edition released physically or a re-release on newer consoles with everything included, but not everything did. I got into Fist of the North Star a couple of years ago, and last year got past the point that the first Ken's Rage game covers. I thought it would be a fun time to buy the game and record it for a few videos. But there were DLC that's no longer available, and it's actually important content like additional playable characters, so I still haven't bought the game. I am willing to use other methods when content is no longer available legitimately, but I'm not an expert. I don't know if there is a way to find downloads of delisted DLC out there. Things like that and servers shutting down have affected what I can cover from that generation more than any other. The only things I'm willing to let slide are things like achievements and trophies from playing an online multiplayer mode that has since been shut down, since as I said, I'm not big on online play anyway. Another thing that I've discovered doesn't work for me is planning far ahead. A couple months ago I had an idea. I wrote out a list of games to complete that would get me to 300, and then have the next 100 games after that be entirely made up of games from series I've already started on this channel, to make a bit more progress on some of the larger ones, and maybe get more smaller series finished. I got excited with my plans at first, but after a few weeks, said plan left me feeling mentally drained. So with a consistent schedule and keeping in mind games that take more than one video to cover, I can get around an average of 50 games covered in a year. My videos have me currently in the 230s. I'd just planned away the next 3.5 years of my life, and it was too much. And it was too restrictive. About half the games I record aren't really planned, they come to me in the moment. By rigidly locking in the next 3 years, that meant that whenever I thought, oh, I could do that game, I'd realise I'd blocked myself from doing it for 3 years. So I had to cancel those plans. I found simply winging it and playing what I want when I feel like it works so much better for me than sticking to a plan. That also helps with longer games like the mentioned Samurai Warriors I'm playing footage of over this video. All I have left is stat and skill maxing the 15 playable characters before I can move on to Extreme Legends. But if you've played the original version, you know how time consuming it can end up when you've nearly hit your XP cap and still have a lot of skills to learn. 25 minutes to gain 80 skill points for a character without gaining XP, with a few thousand points worth of skills left to learn. And this is just the first of 15 characters. Giving myself a deadline for such a long, tedious process also doesn't help me. So being able to put these long grinds on the back burner or as a secondary game to pick away at while I'm also working on getting other games fully recorded does wonders. It's also why Final Fantasy II, which I said I was working on earlier last year, is taking an eternity. Even moving over to an emulator and using 1000% speed, maxing out rare drops to the perfect save is something I don't want to be spending all day doing. So I'll put it aside and come back to it for a bit and then move on to something else once the grind gets too long again. So here's a recent Insecurity. I've brought up before that my grandmother died in December last year. I mentioned it in the most recent collecting video, I talk about it in the upcoming second Metroid Prime video for personal reasons regarding that game, and it will come up when I eventually do the Kukiyomi video I promised a year and a half ago because her illness and death is the main reason that video has been delayed so long. It was the single worst experience of my life, and just thinking about the last 6 months of 2023 is too difficult for me. And despite how much of my memories of a lot of game series are from time spent playing them with her, I feel hesitant to talk about it because a certain charity fraudster has ruined the act of losing a loved one while also running a YouTube channel about 100% in games. I prefer to avoid bringing up other YouTubers I have negative opinions on because it would just drag down the mood of my own videos, but I can't ignore this one. During my grandmother's last week with us, me and my mum basically took turns staying with her through the nights. It got to the point for me that it was easier for me to stay up all night instead of just trying to sleep to keep a proper eye on her and be able to help her right away when she needed it, which would get to be nearly every 20 or so minutes. And I just remember reading up on the latest on that fraud situation on my phone while she was asleep for a bit one night, not knowing that I would watch her die the very next day. So seeing him use his dead mother and her cognitive decline as a shield to gain sympathy and deflect from his actions, after having just watched the strongest, most independent person I've known decline cognitively, well, it touched a very raw nerve. I'd already fallen off his videos around 2017 or 2018, but that is someone I could never respect again. I should take the chance to say that this channel is in no way inspired by the Completionist, and I'm not just saying that because he's been disgraced. The first ideas for this channel started around 2009, where I thought, what if I did a YouTube channel where I did Let's Plays where I fully 100%ed every game I played? It was never a serious thought. I didn't have the means to start a channel or record games, and I certainly did not have the confidence at 16 to put myself out there like that. But it was a comforting little thing to imagine when I wasn't doing anything else during college, or when I was smacked up on painkillers after the surgery that I took 2 years to fully heal from. Although even now, 8.5 years later after the wound healed, I'm still feeling the effects of it. Deep down, I always knew that I didn't have the energy or charisma to narrate a Let's Play video. What caused the next step was when I discovered Hardcore Gaming 101's Top 47k Games podcast in 2016. Now, I've only listened to maybe 2 of their podcasts back then, but I did regularly check their ever-growing ranking, and it got me thinking about my own. About how I would add to my own list and in what order. And when I was healed and back in work in a dull, soul-destroying warehouse job, my mind would keep drifting to this idea. Ooh, where would I place this game? Which order would I cover these games? After a year and a half of this, 9 years since the original YouTube idea came to me, I got fed up with just imagining it and decided to just try it. If I failed, but at least I actually tried. Of course there were plans in between that and uploading the first video, but that is how we got here. I should say I do feel some guilt about how this channel has been able to make it to this many videos. I've said before that my mum was diagnosed with cancer while I was making episode 5. But what I didn't say is that episodes 1 to 4 before it were made during a period of unemployment, and I was about to get looking for another job when she was diagnosed. But of course she needed someone to look after her and help out during treatment, so me needing to stay home gave me the free time to continue the channel. The last 5 years of my life has been spent looking after ill, dying or disabled family, so I don't know what to feel about the fact that what has let the channel last so long is constant family tragedy. But as I've said before, working on the channel has been a very helpful outlet for me between all the horrible things happening lately. Speaking of other YouTubers, I have no interest in the idea of a collab with another channel. And to be fair, I have only 79 subscribers right now. They have no interest in collabing with me because they don't know I exist. I've never been a big fan of the YouTube scripted gaming review collab aesthetic. You know, YouTuber A is interrupted mid-video by a recording of YouTuber B in their own house, and they trade scripted banter while pretending their pre-recorded segments are taking place in the same room despite one having vastly different camera quality. They usually feel so pointless because YouTuber B is usually just reading a script by YouTuber A, including having to recite YouTuber A's opinions as if they were their own, basically making the guest interchangeable with any other YouTuber. And since the point of these videos is my own experience and opinions and rankings of these games, another person's input is pointless. I doubt when I was covering the Lunar Ruins in Final Fantasy IV, it would have been improved if half the video was someone called, I don't know, Triple Testicle Tiger Train saying, "And then UltraKintaro opened this chest and killed this enemy." I hope that's not an actual person's username, by the way, I just made it up. The best you could hope for is if I ever streamed a game, which given my home situation is very unlikely, at least with commentary, while chatting with someone and I included a funny stream moment in the final video. Want to hear about some video regrets? There are a few moments from earlier videos that I look back on and just cringe. I've said before that my Sonic 1 video is my worst one, and I still stand by that. The thing about me is that I'm not funny. Not often anyway. I'll make one person do a big laugh maybe every 6 months. But in those early days I was still very nervous and tried to overcompensate with humour, and an easy target for me is mocking when I mess up in a game, especially on an easy part because I got complacent. But in that video I tried to script showing frustration, and I did it too often in that one video. Using the Tom and Jerry scream to show frustration, Shao Kahn yelling no from MK2, using some footage from DBZ Budokai to call myself an idiot after another death, it was too much. And yet that's not the part I'm most embarrassed by, it's this from the second part of Shantae Half Genie Hero. This is probably my most incompetent moment so far. This better not continue, or by episode 12 I'm going to be lacerating my ballsack trying to switch on the N64 or something. That video was nearly 5 years ago, and I still feel deep embarrassment over that. Another attempt at compensating for nervousness through humour, this time going the vulgar route. But as I've said, I'm not funny, I'm not witty, and so there was no way I could have pulled off a joke like that without just sounding weird. There's a few others that come to mind. In BCV Battle Construction Vehicles, I tried to criticise how two characters being gay was portrayed as a joke. Like, the fact that these two men were in a relationship was in itself supposed to be funny. But I couldn't just be normal about it and say those exact words. I had to go on this weirdly worded, "Is this supposed to be a joke or something because I don't get it" bit, where I should have just said, "The game acts as if Beth being gay is in itself a joke and it's not funny." That early on I was still in a bit of a nervousness phase and was struggling without a word calling out a bad portrayal of a group I'm not part of, so I overthought it and wrote it like an alien. This part in Distrager, which otherwise is one of the earliest videos I still have some positive opinion on.
Falma, sire, I want him killed whether he succeeds or not. This will also give me an excuse to get rid of Milena, failing to protect her charge.
Don't interrupt me.
Beautifully played.
That sounded so much better in my head when I first thought of it, but I should have known I wouldn't be able to pull it off. I'm not an actor, so of course a comedic surprise gasp would sound awkward as hell. And that early on I couldn't be too loud to risk of others in the house hearing me, but for some reason I went through with it anyway. There's this little line when talking about Yamcha in my Dragon Ball Z Budokai video. It's the Doctor Who Rose Tile/Mickey thing again, except this time Yamcha's actor better not turn out to be a sex pest months after I put this video out. Okay, so I can't see the future, but that was just tempting fate. Thanks for adding that baggage to my video, Furuya. Also go fuck yourself. I also used the term objectively to say the Yamcha reincarnation spin-off was the best Dragon Ball story since Battle of Gods. That was deliberate hyperbole to show my disdain for the majority of what came from 2014 to 2018, but I really hate the current misuse by twatty nerds on the internet of the word objective when it comes to subjective tastes on media, so I do wish I hadn't used that word in hindsight. A more recent one is in my Dead or Alive video. I had to talk about the fact that rape plays a big part in a couple characters' backstories. I felt I couldn't ignore it and decided to talk about its portrayal. I did not feel comfortable at all writing about it, but I felt I covered it to the best of my ability, until the very end where I let the nervousness win and tried to mask it with humour. But it could be much worse. They could do what Mortal Kombat 11 did with Sindel and Shao Kahn. Not just humour, but using it to get a jab in at another game for doing something I didn't like. I've made no secret that I hated the MK11 Sindel retcon, and for a while taking shots at it was an infrequent running thing. It's my least favourite story decision in any Mortal Kombat game, and it happened not long after I started uploading videos. But that was not the time to get my little digs in. I didn't feel good about it as I wrote it, but I gave in to my insecurity on talking about the subject and I had no time to work out something else, so in it went. I felt so ashamed while I was uploading it that I quietly dropped the running thing of mocking MK11 Sindel. I didn't enjoy using it anymore. I'll only talk about it in actual MK videos from now on. Another cutting from the future. I can't believe I forgot this one. Forgotten Realms Demon Stone. Look, I'm not into Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop RPGs at all. I didn't know that Forgotten Realms was a huge thing far beyond the one game I thought it was when I made that video. I mean, I know of the likes of Neverwinter Nights and Baldur's Gate, but I didn't know they were part of that setting. The odd time I'm told that like 2 people have watched that video recently, I'm just like, and I'm begging this isn't the first of my videos they've watched. Normally I wouldn't be apologetic for simply not knowing of something, but the cluelessness I showed in that video was on another level. Doesn't change my opinion of the game though. Also, the thumbnail is shit. I didn't have good box art choices to work with, and the screenshots in my thumbnails are taken from my gameplay recordings, and that game's recordings didn't come out looking that great in the first place. A couple more I'm adding in. There's a few times where I feel I didn't express my opinion on something in the best way. Usually these are moments where my opinion clashes with general fandom, or at least a huge chunk of it. The moments that come to mind for me are my disagreement with the backlash against Melina's initial absence in MK11 in the Mortal Kombat 2 video, and showing my annoyance with the ubiquity of all these scary Lavender Tower internet stuff in the early 2010s in the Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow videos. It's not that I don't believe what I said, I just feel I was needlessly harsh and aggressive against those I was disagreeing with. These were things I'd been waiting to talk about since the channel began, and I think I let myself get carried away a bit after the years of waiting to talk about it. I can say that whenever I get to MK3, I'll clarify my feelings on the Melina matter in a more reasonable way, because it's tied to an issue I've had with the series since 2015 that goes beyond that one character. I also probably didn't need the 20-something minute Dragon Ball rant at the start of the Super Butoden video. I'm not surprised that video got me my first ever dislike, and I'm assuming that was the reason. Another symptom of me taking years to get to something I'd been wanting to talk about. I started recording games for this channel around the time it was announced there was a 4th Broly film, and so I'd started writing that whole thing in my head back then in 2018. So by 2021 it had grown out of hand. I've still avoided that film, but I'll be covering a game with Broly in it in episode 53, so I'll talk about it then. I am curious though. I've gone on these little rants about mistakes and regrets in this video, but has anyone who watched the videos I've brought up shared any of these criticisms themselves before I brought them up here? The response won't change my own opinion, we're all usually our own biggest critics, but I'm just wondering. And back to the original video once again for the last one. But my biggest mistake is probably the 10 bonus episodes. You know, the ones marked as episode B11 and so on from the early days. It's needlessly confusing for anyone new to the channel and is a symptom of the format of the channel still not being fully set when I started uploading. So my original plan was to do a series of basic reviews instead of the play-by-play of my process in 100% in the game that I settled on. I recorded around 30 games and started making some test reviews that I had no intention of uploading and are long since deleted. I started with the Super Nintendo Beavis and Butthead, and then did Metal Slug, Street Fighter, Altered Beast, and a very bad 7-minute Sword of the Million review that skips over most of the game. I then had a go at writing a Dragon Ball Z Budokai review and realised that this wasn't working out. So I shelved the whole thing for a few months while I tried to work out how best to do this. Early 2019 I finally thought up the idea of treating it almost like a blog, where I'd play some games over a certain period of time and then make a video explaining what I had accomplished in that time. When I made the first 3 episodes, they were intended to be one large video. So instead of episode 1-1 on Castlevania, episode 1-2 on the Super Spy, and episode 1-3 on my first chunk of Phantasy Star, there would just be episode 1 containing all 3 of the videos as different segments. It was only when I uploaded the first full episodes 1, 2 and 3 unlisted to show some friends and get some feedback before I made them public, I was wisely advised to split each game into their own video, as people will be less likely to sit through an hour or more long video just for the game they're actually interested in. So that was sorted out, but I still had these 30 games recorded from the year before, and they didn't fit into the blog idea I was still working with. So that's where the bonus episode idea came from. Of course, now the idea is irrelevant. Back then the videos were made in the order I played the games, so I did play it in that order: Castlevania, then the Super Spy, then the parts of Phantasy Star I covered in its first video, then Double Dragon, then the parts of Phantasy Star in its second part, and so on. But eventually I stopped working like that because it just made things easier when I could order the videos however I wanted, which is how we have some games I recorded over 2 years ago still waiting for videos. But with the blog idea long a thing of the past, there was no reason why episode B1 couldn't have just been episode 4, and why episode 52, which I'm still in the middle of making, should really have been episode 62. But it's too late now, the episode names are referenced in a few videos and trying to correct it now would cause more confusion. And I think that's everything I care to ramble on about. Thanks a lot if you actually sat through this whole thing. Regular videos start again on the 13th of September with Metroid Prime Remastered Part 2. Episode 52 will still be 6 days between videos. I've been trying to get things back to the 5 days between videos we had in 2022 and 2023, but things have been difficult behind the scenes. I'm still trying to get that all scheduled back though, just give me some time.